Alongside our Thursday co-host, Pierre Noujam, Fox 9 Minneapolis. Pierre, this is an exciting day today. Just to tease, we've been doing these pick'ems this is to be our third week, and this is the first week we're going to do punishments, and Garrett is decked out. And we're not going to show him right now because I want to build the anticipation of a die-hard LSU fan. I mean die-hard. It was bad. It was tense between us a couple weeks ago. And now that FSU has beaten LSU 2 years in a row, technically by prison rules, I own Garrett, if you know what I mean.
Correct.
But since we don't do that here, I just get to tease him for a little while. Well, I did not know this until this morning. And all about his wife. His wife is a gigantic Alabama fan. And he has spent years trying to quell that fire. This punishment has reignited her Alabama fandom. And not only did we get him a t-shirt, there was already a hat here in the studio in the backdrop. And he has a Houndstooth scarf. So he is ready to go hang out with ATO at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
I have to know, Paul. I have to know how Garrett ended up with being such a diehard LSU fan, and his wife is diehard Alabama. How did that work? How did that work?
Look, I will quote Paula Abdul: "Opposites attract."
Hey, fair.
Yes,
He did a lot.
And
did a lot better than I did.
She and DJ Scat Cat were not the same.
No.
But
fair.
They made it work. It work.
He's a lot bigger man than I am, because I remember about 15 years ago being in a bar and talking to a girl who was completely out of my league, and we stumbled upon talking about football, and I said, "Oh, who's your favorite team?" She said, "Oh, I'm a huge Jets fan," and I turned around and walked away and didn't even say anything else to her. I just left her right there at the bar. This was not going to work.
Yeah. I had a huge crush on a girl when I was in college that went to the University of Florida. And
oh, man.
My friends convinced me, dude, don't pursue it. Don't pursue it. And look, everything's wound up for me great now. I'm very happily married. So I'm glad. But I remember being at the time going, this seems petty. This seems like a dumb reason. I know a lot of people who are dating, it's still 2.5 hours away. And I had a massive crush on her. And they're like, listen, just be friends with her, man. She's just going to break your heart. And I was like, is this because she's a gator? And they're like, no.
Hey, friends looking out for you. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I'm plenty proud of Garrett. This is tough. And then Levi Caraway, our social media maven. Did he get the short end of it. He picked Tulane last week. That put him behind all the rest of us, and he will be doing the pick segment from a porta potty, I believe at McLean Stadium right down the street. Here's the thing. I gave him the ability to choose the porta potty. It's not like we went around scouting him out and picked a bad one. It's all on him, but he will be joining you on Zoom from a porta potty.
I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned with the porta potty choice. I mean, has it been staying outside in the Waco sun, all day? And, what time is it? 1 o'clock now? Oh, well, man.
Okay. Here's the thing. It is actually, for the last 2 days, it has been raining here, which we have not had in a while. So
really?
I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
We'd have to consult a meteorologist on that, because I'm not sure myself. So
yeah. So anyway, all right, Pierre, let's dive into our first topic of the day. Through the first 2 weeks, now granted, there are some brands that are down, but this has the potential to be one of the most brand heavy and brand rejuvenated college football seasons ever. Look, Michigan spent the last couple years getting their brand back up. USC has the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and that brand is back up. Texas just beat Alabama, a game that you picked, which was a big difference for you.
Poorly, I might add.
Hey, look, you picked Texas, so you went out on a limb.
I know I didn't pick Texas.
Texas.
Not only did I pick Alabama, I picked Texas to lose by,
right.
2 scores.
Yeah.
I picked Texas to lose by 2 touchdowns. So good call on my part.
Yeah, I might have let you influence me there a little bit too.
Yeah.
But so Texas beating Alabama, and the hype train is starting to build on them. Florida State appears to be contending again, much to my joy. Look, people may not remember this, but Colorado used to be one of the best programs in college football. And now not only are they on the hype train, their hype train is the conductor is the most famous person you could imagine being a college football coach. Like there's no, there's no way to, like Miami drubbed A&M last week, and they have not been relevant since the 01 team, really, which was maybe the best team pound for pound, player for player in the history of college football.
Yeah.
So are you one of these people who believes college football is better when the big brands are better, or do you think that is maybe too elitist of a stance?
It's tough because the majority of me wants to say yes, I do feel it is better. But I remember, what was it, 2 years ago? Was it 2 years ago when Cincinnati made the playoff? And I was like, that's a cool story. I like that. I think that's pretty cool that Cincinnati gets in like some national spotlight. And I was all for that. But I am kind of one of those, and again, for those who are listening who are not familiar with my background, I grew up in Northern California, which is not exactly a college football hotbed by any means. However, growing up, it was Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, Miami, like you said, Miami was a huge power. Nebraska was a huge power. So I remember these brands being as big as they were. So yeah, when I see some of those teams doing well like they have so far, yeah, it kind of makes me, I'm like, all right, the boys are back. Let's get it on. It's good to see some of these teams back. So I don't know if I'd say I'd be elitist about it. Like I said, I like the Cincinnati story from a couple of years ago. So, but I am pleased to see some of these teams back in the fold in the upper echelon in the country.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on who you're a fan of, really. For example, if you cover Minnesota, if Minnesota can beat North Carolina this week, I mean, that's going to be a huge upset if they do. But if they can beat North Carolina, then you've got a situation where you get Minnesota fans. They're like, no, we don't want brands in this thing. Out.
Right.
Like, of course, granted, they were the last team to win it 3 times in a row. So maybe they think of themselves as the original brand.
I love how some of the students on campus probably tout that too. Yeah, we're the last to win 3 in a row. What was that, like almost 100 years ago or whatever it was? Like, let's go. It's been a long time since Minnesota's gotten to say something like that. But yeah, listen, when Miami was going good, and I know you don't love to hear this, but when Miami was going good back in the day, man, they made documentaries about the school and the team, and for good reason. They were entertaining. They had swag. They just had really, really good football players, and it just kind of brought me back. It just brought me back a little bit to those days.
Look, I had to sit in wide right 3 in the Orange Bowl in 2000. Which was the year before. Florida State wound up by a dumb stroke of BCS luck of getting more points than Miami, who beat them. Because that was like, it was very similar to when you were here then, when Baylor and TCU in the first playoff, when like TCU had a loss and Baylor lost to West Virginia, TCU's loss was to Baylor, and somehow the Big 12 was like, well, TCU's got a better loss than Baylor does. And you're like, but it's to Baylor, so shouldn't that count more? The BCS computers thought the same thing 14 years before when Miami and Florida State both had a loss. And I can't remember who Miami was to, but it was early in the year. And then they beat Florida State. Florida State missed a field goal again at the last as time expired. Matt Munyon, who had to leave school after that. Poor guy. But that happened, and then the BCS computers are like, well, we still think Florida State's better. And they're like, yeah, but shouldn't you count it more if the one loss, like, seems to me that, like, you're splitting hairs now. And Florida State went and lost to Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl that year. So
was that the Peter Warwick year?
No, that was the year after. That was the year after.
Okay,
that was the year after. So, yeah, Peter Warwick Peter Warwick sent Mike Vick back to Virginia sad. That's what he did.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that was the year after. So I am one of the ones who feels that college football is better when teams like Miami are good again. I do also. I'm not like I'm rooting for the small brands to be bad. Like I do want college football though to be more cyclical, where you don't get tired of things. Where we've all grown tired of the Alabama narrative, right? And I'm not chastising Alabama for it. Everybody, we're all fans of schools that aren't them, that can't figure out how to do it like them. Well, yeah, that's not Bama's fault. That's everybody else's for not figuring them out yet. But I do think it is better when I would love to see a different team win the SEC. I mean, it'd be like if somebody popped up and won it, that'd be great. That had never won it before. That'd be wonderful.
And I think that's part of the beauty of college football, because I think there's enough programs and enough talent out there to where it is cyclical, and where you do have enough programs that kind of turn things. I mean, look, Clemson a decade ago wasn't Clemson 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Suddenly Clemson comes into the fold. And Oregon, I remember growing up, Oregon wasn't that big yet, but then they kind of emerged. So I think there's enough programs, really good programs around for it to be cyclical in that way. And I want to, before we move on, I'm glad you brought up the that year with Baylor and TCU, because I vividly remember being on the sideline watching, after I forget who Baylor played in the last game of the regular season that year. It might have been K-State, if I'm not mistaken. I probably am wrong on that. But I remember vividly watching Art Briles berate Bob Bowlesby.
Oh, it was Texas.
Oh, was it? Yes, it was Texas. It was Texas. I remember after the game, Art Briles berating Bob Bowlesby on the, that championship podium that they had, and him just laying into him about, I couldn't hear the conversation, but I knew what the conversation was about, essentially crowning Baylor and TCU co-champions, and Bob Bowlesby did not have a very happy look on his face. I absolutely remember that day. We could talk about the Baylor TCU rivalry for a whole other show.
Hey, here's what I remember. I was not there. I was in the press room already, but everybody was coming in and going, "Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh." Like, holy cow. Like, you would not believe no, Texas might've been the year before. I can't remember, but this is because that was their second one in a row. I remember they had Texas at home on the last. It was either the last game or second to last game, and it was freezing that day. That was the last game at Floyd Casey. That was freezing, and then the one after, I can't remember who they beat, but yes. And I had a friend who was on the podium with them that heard everything, and boy. You all all came in. You were all talking about it. And you're like, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it." Bowlesby just got yelled at. Oh my gosh, it was bad. And then we're like, "What did he say?" You're like, "We're too far away. We were too far away. We couldn't hear him. We didn't know." And so then I spent the next 30 minutes trying to find out. And then my friend who was down there met me outside. And I was like, he told me, he's like, "This is not right. This is your fault. This is your fault. We're not going to make the playoff because of you. You didn't. You could have said this. We beat TCU. And just Bowlesby didn't really even say anything. He was just like,
no, he didn't really say much. And on top of it too, Art turned out to be exactly right.
Yeah.
He turned out to be exactly right in that moment, because that's exactly what happened. They finished fifth. They were ranked just outside of the top four that year.
Yeah. Because they did, because Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 were trying to outsmart the committee. And correct. What they didn't realize was, if you give us, we have 5 power conferences. If you give us a reason to leave one out, then we have to work less hard. Like that. So
it was so ridiculous. I remember, and I still remember Art, because that was that year they were playing
Michigan State
in the Cotton Bowl, and the press conference that we had with Art Briles at Baylor a few weeks ago or weeks prior, and I asked him a very stupid question, to where I could tell he was annoyed by it, and then ended the press conference immediately after, because he was just so upset by the whole situation. I still remember it to this day. Art was always great with me, but yeah, looking back, I was like, that probably wasn't a great question at the time. Yeah.
No, I mean, sometimes you have to ask people tough questions and you have to answer, and he did not like press conferences.
No.
I mean, and now we kind of know why, but but
yes.
like there are like, that was a wild time. That was a really wild time.
By the way, it was Kansas State.
It was Kansas State. There you go. Great memory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, was Kansas State. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Now I'm remembering the game very vividly now that it's like it's all coming back to me. And the the TCU game that year was 61-58, which is one of the greatest wins in Baylor history that they pulled off. And so it's so crazy. It's so crazy to think that
I could go on about Art and Gary Patterson. We could do 2 more hours of just talking about how the two of them just despised each other. Well, and it was hilarious for me to watch from afar as someone watching from the sideline. I was just giddy. I mean, I was just missing popcorn. That's all I was missing.
It's funny. TCU the year after Gary Patterson leaves winds up in the national championship game.
Right.
And
yes,
it is because would you like to know the difference between Gary Patterson and Bill Belichick?
I would love to know.
So they're both, I think, equal football geniuses. It's like Oppenheimer and Einstein, right? Like both of them have the same level of intellect.
Right.
The difference is that Bill Belichick doesn't give a crap what you say about him. Does not care. Couldn't care less. Coach, I don't know if you heard the rumors. People were talking about this about you. And he's like, I don't do the internet. It's not really my thing.
I'm on to fill in the blank of the next opponent name right here. Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading through statistics in 1975 football, trying to see how I could apply that to my current team here. That's what he was doing. And then you asked Gary Patterson about coach, critics of this suspension will say, well, look, the Gary Patterson. Gary Patterson lives in Fort Worth. And you're like, okay, buddy. So eventually caring that much about people who don't matter to you. And I say this all the time. Look, buddy, you're a college football coach making ridiculous 7 figures. We're just guys asking questions who, when we got our first raise to $34,000 a year, we were like, oh, good. I can get cable.
No absolutely true.
Yeah. So you've won at life in a way that we never will. So just answer the question. You don't have to care so much.
I think he's still complaining about Ahmad Dixon's antics to this day on the sideline. I'm sure he's still complaining about that somewhere.
Yeah. So that's the difference. But to tie it all back into our original topic, that was a year where 2 brands, non-brands, and Baylor and TCU could have got in the playoff, right? Mm-hmm. And the committee said, well, we're going to take Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State, and Alabama?
I think it was Alabama. Yeah. I think it was Alabama.
Because it was Ohio State and Oregon won in the championship game. Florida State lost to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. But because the championship game was in Arlington.
You and I were there for the Cotton Bowl that year against Michigan State. God, what a game that
I was there twice.
Lord.
Cotton Bowl, and then I went back up to the thing, to the national championship game. And I will tell you what I remember most about that game another time where it's not going to be on video.
Very good. Very good. I can't wait to hear that.
That was a year where the brands definitely went out, because when it came time to because they probably thought we're going to have to put TCU or Baylor in this thing. And then the Big 12 said, hey, don't worry about our stupid little non-brand teams. And I say that's how they said it. I thought it was, look, I would have, even if TCU had gotten in, one of those 2 teams should have been in.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
And Ohio State had a bad loss earlier in the year. And they wound up winning it, so that's fine. But Ohio State should have been the team left out of the deal. Based on all that stuff. And so they had a bad loss early in the year, and because Baylor and TCU gave them an out, they gave them a chance to go to the brands. So I would be worried if I'm a non-brand in a year like this year, when it appears that there's, they've resurrected Phoenix rising from the ashes, Texas and Florida State, Michigan and Georgia were in the playoff the last couple of years. All of those things have happened, and you have got now like the chance for the little guy to get in is you're going to have to really thread a needle.
I still remember feeling, I still feel this way to this very day. And I'm with you. I thought Ohio State should have been the team that was left out because I think Ohio State stunk in at 4. They played, I think it was Ohio State and Alabama, was it not, in the semifinal? And I still wonder what we would have seen if Baylor and Alabama would have gone head-to-head and Art Briles, Nick Saban coaching match. I still salivate at the possibility of what that could have been in a national semifinal, and we didn't get to see it. And it's unfortunate. But like you said, Ohio State gets the nod. They come in, they win 2 games, they win the whole thing. So I guess more power to them. But I still wonder what would have been if we would have seen Baylor and Alabama in the semifinal.
Yeah, I had to sit in a room with Urban Meyer while he celebrated winning another national championship. Now, granted, it was at a different school, but
right.
You want to talk about how fast can I get home and get in the shower so I can wash off this feeling of
stings still just the same.
It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Oh, man.
He was in that.
Brutal.
Like, yeah. Well, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, this is just this guy. This, like, the whole time he's talking, all I can think is this bleeping guy.
This guy. This is not my kind of, you're pulling a Frank Costanza. This is not my kind of guy.
This is not my kind of guy. All right, when we come back, a new segment. Last week we had This Week in Coach Speak. This week we have, dude, why? You'll find out in a second. This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like